Hello, everyone. This is Irlianna Samsara back again with another edition of StarSound Speaks, StarSound Astrology. So this is a really big week as we've been speaking for a very long time. Yay, 2020 is over. Oh, right? Yeah, you made it, right? We made it. We made it this far. Well, good news. The baby that was being born in labor all year, the head was crowning, in the fall, and the final push, Saturn went into the sign of Aquarius, finally, and out of Capricorn, where it has been for the last 2.5, 3 years. It entered in December of 2017, and now when it was 0 Capricorn, and now it's 0 Aquarius. And that's a whole different ball game. And I feel it will, all the hard work and sacrifices and efforts that we have had to make in the last few years in order to move forward collectively and individually, now is we're going to see it bear fruit in a very new and dynamic and exciting way. Why is it new and different? Well, for two reasons. We've got Uranus in the sign of Taurus, right? As it's been traveling through Taurus, and that's all about dropping our old fixed ideas of our values and the things that are important to us, and coming from a very dynamic, fresh perspective. And we also have, of course, the South Node in the sign of Sagittarius. So that represents a kind of a falling away, a decay and an aging and a falling away of old belief systems and questioning, right? So the evolutionary path for all of us to take since last May 2020, when the nodes shifted into Gem Sag, until January of next year. So we have another year of this journey of questioning, right? Not just believing everything, as that saying, believing it a gospel truth, because it says so here. It's like, it's about intuitively grasping these high spiritual truths and living them for ourselves, direct experience of truth, not because this thing says it on page 73 that, of whatever religion. I'm not knocking any faith here, whether it's, Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim, Judaism, it's whatever dogmatic belief systems have locked us in, wherever that is. We want to embrace the mystical aspect of all these world's religions, or no religion, or pagan druidic practice, like whatever your boat is. This is about letting go of our fixed ideas and beliefs about what we know to be true, and to be willing to just put them aside and listen and come from another place and reach to another place, with our ideas and our attitudes and our thinking. So this is all very exciting as Jupiter and Saturn together in Aquarius, what this looks like. So I have some things here to share with you, and it's always, I tell you, every Friday, it's like, okay, I'm not taking any clients on Friday. I just devote the whole day to like this deep research of what I want to do. And I know what I want to say, but I always want to get my facts, and line up things to just show us, what's the narrative here. So anyway, having said that, let's move into this and just jump in and see what we got. So Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Those are the two. Jupiter and Saturn are the two biggest planetary bodies in our solar system. They're huge. They're gas giants. Jupiter is the largest. It's even bigger than Saturn. Of course, Saturn has the ring, so he looks special. The both of them are very special. Saturn represents wow, so many things, society and the collective, and the qualities of discipline and focus and ambition and achievement and hard work and time, and aging too, aging and decay, and the passage of time, timelessness, timeless qualities, legacies, lineages, things of that nature. And Saturn in Aquarius, it's been in Capricorn. So that, and I have to say too, that was, in ancient astrology, Saturn is ruled by Aquarius. So it's in its domicile. Which it's a term in astrology. It means it's very at home there. So Saturn is, really two rulers, Capricorn and Aquarius, but it's really going to do better in Aquarius. It's kind of like it's just going to flourish. So I'm going to take you back in time, and we're going to show you, because we know cycles of time, we're going to go back and look and see, how did this play out in the past, and how can we use that as clues to assist us as we move forward. So as we know, Saturn in Aquarius, and then Jupiter, before I go ahead with the timeline, I just want to say, Jupiter in Aquarius is, Jupiter is the planet of God consciousness, right? It's like Jupiter is the Roman name for Zeus, the Greek name Zeus, right? And he was the dude, the CEO of the heavens, of the pantheon, right? The entire Greek pantheon was by Zeus. And so he was the chief. So and Jupiter is the law, the scales of justice. It's the law, and it's morality and doing the right thing, and justice, all of these qualities. It's also about philosophy and higher wisdom and spirituality and confidence and optimism and foreign travel and travel to faraway places. This expansion of self and boldly going, right, where no one has gone before, that's very Jupiterian. So now Jupiter, which has been in Capricorn for the last year, it's not really Jupiter in Capricorn is Jupiter. He's in its detriment. That's not a good place for Jupiter, because Capricorn's a very restrictive. It's like, oh, you'll get your award, but you got to work for it. You got to put in the, sweat and tears. Well, Jupiter doesn't like that. Jupiter wants to take that Neiman Marcus, gift certificate and go wild. No. So Jupiter in Aquarius is going to be a bigger, it's going to be a whole different shift. And so he'll be out of, I'm saying him, just whatever, right? Jupiter will be out of its, transit in Capricorn tomorrow, and it will be at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And both Jupiter and Saturn are meeting up. Of course, our solstice is coming this Monday. The solstice is winter solstice in the northern hemisphere and summer solstice in the south. And so the two of them together is, it's quite a powerhouse. So we're looking at enormous opportunity here. We also have to remember too that Uranus in Taurus, it's retrograde, and on Monday it's going to be at its 6th. It's going to retrograde back to 6 degrees 36 minutes. Well, it's going to be it's at 7 right now, and it's going to go to 6 on Monday. So it's going to be at the point at which it's slowing down, because it's ready to go direct again. It's been retrograde since the middle of August. And now it's about to make that U-turn, slowing down to make that U-turn, right? And to move forward. Well, Aquarius, the modern ruler of Aquarius is Uranus. So you have Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius, and then the ruling planet of Aquarius is in modern astrology is in Taurus. So Uranus is going to make a square, a challenging aspect with Jupiter and Saturn. And that's going to be one of the major transits of next year. I'll be talking more about that in future videos. But just suffice it to say that next month is going to be an interesting ride. With all of these, that Uranian energy and the Aquarian energy about progress and forward movement, it's all going to become, you could say it'll be definitely at one point will be coming to a head, and it will really be very much so for the United States, because in the chart of the United States, it is what do you call it? The nodes of the USA are in Leo and Aquarius, so that's it's like a T-square, right? So you got Leo, Aquarius, and then you got Taurus, right? That Uranus is now in Taurus, so it's making a T-square. to the nodes of the U.S. So Uranus, that's a real push to be inventive and change and stand up and work together. It's all about, very interesting because, like, you know, Bernie Sanders, who is a progressive Democrat, as we know in America, his campaign slogan when he was running for president was "We, not me." So that's very, very Aquarian. And even the President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, the name of their plan, or I don't know if it's the administration or the current project, is called Build Back Better. That's totally Aquarian, you know. So it's, as we were entering that all evolved as we were getting ready to enter into this wonderful, wonderful new chapter in history. So yes, it's all about progress, change for the better. You know, it's fixed air. Aquarius is a fixed air sign, so it's about the intellect and ideas and visionary ideas, bringing them together and creating the base, like solidifying ourselves with progressive, inventive ideas, revolutionary breakthroughs, right? So this is all what's available to us. And then when I say progressive, I want you to take it out of any possible political context. I'm talking about progress in general, okay? So just to say that. So anyway, yeah, so let's dive in and look at that timeline. So this timeline, well, we always look back in history to see, you know, when was the last time Jupiter and Saturn were Aquarius? Let's look and see what was happening in the world at that time, because that's going to give us some clues, and we can use those clues for this particular cycle. And I also have to say too, before I jump into the timeline, you know, or as part of the timeline, you have to understand that this is not just a planet changing signs. You know, like the sun will change signs, you know, every, 12 times a year, right? Goes through the whole zodiac. Saturn changes signs about every 2.5 years. Jupiter changes signs about once a year. But this is not just an ordinary sign change. It's always important when a planet goes to the 0 degrees. You know, it's the first degree of the sign is 0 degrees. However, Saturn and Jupiter, they, in the incredible, vast panoply, I don't know how that word came up, of nature, this incredible, the incredible design of nature with the planetary movements and cycles within cycles. Jupiter and Saturn both come together in the same sign every 20 years. So 20 years ago, in 2000, they came together in the sign of Taurus. And they've been in the sign, excuse me, they've been in Earth signs for the last 200 years. So obviously, none of us are old enough to remember when they were not in the Earth signs, right? So since about 1820, they've been in either Capricorn, Taurus, or Virgo, excuse me. Where's my water? Oh, hold on, gotta get my water. Okay, I'm back, thank you. Oh, had to wet my whistle. So for 200 years, they've been in the sign of Earth signs, right? And after 200 years, Jupiter and Saturn will then move into air. So it's like, you know, earth, air, fire, water. Earth, air, fire, water. So this is a cycle of time. Well, in the Earth signs, that was all about, well, think about it, it's Earth, it's 3D, it's heavy, it's materialism, right? Capitalism and that conquering idea. It's, you know, this sense of achievement through things on the Earth, and just a very different approach to our reality, right? Saturn can be government, society, and the very warp and weft, the very weave of our society. And anyway, so the nature of our reality has been very Earth oriented. You know, you think about things in history like, you know, the Eiffel Tower and these engineering marvels and dams and things. It's like, oh, we're going to conquer nature. We're gonna use our skills and focus on the earth and create all these things. Well, you know, some of it was good, but you know, of course, everything has its shadow. But now we're into a new phase. When the signs change into air signs, this is all about air. It's intellect, it's ideas. And in the sign of Aquarius, build back better. You know, that really sums up a lot of that. And it's very much invention and unity and diversity. You know, so it's exciting to know that we're stepping. It's also about, you know, Aquarius is about the unknown and the and something truly to be. I would say too, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That might be a good base to operate from. Having gone through what we've gone through in 2020 with the Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all in Capricorn, it was busting up and breaking down this heavy Earth-centered energy. And that materialism is systemic racism, imperialism, you know, colonialism, all those old structures that had to dissolve and break in order to bring forth something new, right? You got to clear the slate. We are still, of course, in the middle of this pandemic. And I have an invitation for you later. I'm going to share about, you know, using this energy and one possible way we could engage ourselves in the potential and bring about, you know, true and lasting breakthroughs. But I'm going to get to that a little later. Anyway, so the timeline. So the last time that Jupiter and Saturn were in Aquarius was in the year 1405. So what's that, 600 years ago? And of course, when we think about that in the West, we had the Renaissance, right? It was the beginning of the Renaissance. So the Renaissance, what was that all about? Well, there was this break from, there was the discoveries, right? What did we just, discover? Was it Leonardo da Vinci? He discovered the golden mean. So it allowed artists to draw the, you know, the golden ratio. You've seen the picture, like a nautilus shell in the circle, right? The mathematical constants. And it enabled, it was a huge breakthrough. It enabled the painters of the time to draw to scale. So the anatomy of the body, you're probably familiar with the Vitruvian Man, that's, you know, which was one of the illustrations that Leonardo drew of the man with his arms and legs stretched out, right? So this is all about showing everything in divine harmonic perfection. And so all of the art, the painted figures and sculpture and painting were all with, of course, the correct proportions of arms and legs. If you look at early pre-Renaissance, late medieval painting and Byzantine painting, the faces and the symbol, you know, on mosaics and paintings were not drawn to, you know, to scale. It was not in that proper mathematical harmony. They hadn't cracked the code yet. So Da Vinci cracking the code was huge, right? So that was one example of, here's this, you know, Aquarian, right? Mathematical scientific breakthrough. And all the effects, you know, that it had, and of course, bringing back, you know, all the painters rushed to create, you know, the ancient Greek and Roman sculptures and art and everything looking like the Grecian past. And it was really an incredible resurgence of these ancient, you know, books, knowledges. It was, and the way to draw them and represent them. So that was like a pretty good idea. Another thing that happened in the year 1405 in my research, I discovered was there was a general by the name of a Chinese admiral in the Ming Dynasty, and he was Admiral Zheng He. I think I'm pronouncing it right. He set sail to go around on a world voyage, you know, to discover new worlds. And so that was a big deal, obviously, in 1405. So that, you know, the question for us might be, you know, where would you like to sail into new places? right? There was like, they didn't have maps and radar and GPS like we do now. So there was a lot of unknown. You didn't know if you'd make it, right? So many ships were lost at sea in those days. Well, setting sail to go around the world, that's a perfect example, right? Going into the unknown to discover new things. It's very, very Aquarian. Let's see. Then the next, previous to that, before 1405, was 1226, the year 1226. And what was going on for the world in 1226? Well, for one thing, there was the Crusades, the Albigensian Crusades. And those Crusades were, the Catholic Church had amassed great power, and they were trying to, it was a battle between them, the status quo, and a group of people that were living mostly in the southwest of France in a little town called Albi. So they called the Albigensians, or the people who lived in Albi, and most of those people were Cathars. And that was a group of, that kind of broke away from the Orthodox, I don't say Orthodox meaning Greek Orthodox, it's just the traditional conventional views of the church at the time. And they interpreted, you know, Bible and Jesus and all those teachings in a different way. And they didn't eat meat. They were very feminist, or they really were there for the leadership of women. So it's a group that you would consider in this day and age very progressive. Well, the church didn't like that, and they were and they went after them, you know, unfortunately. But again, it's just showing you this clash between, you know, the status quo and this group of people. Right now, that took place over a very long time. The Crusades, right? It's not like a one-off thing, right? It took decades. However, it's interesting to, when you consider that there was. You know, I think there's more to this than we hear about in history. I think there's, if we go in and intuit these things, we'll come up with some pretty fascinating insights. And I have to say, one time, I will digress here and say, there was a man I met many years ago who gave a talk locally in my community. And I remember him talking about these esoteric records and things that had been found, even that you could consider from like otherworldly sources, like extraterrestrial sources or other dimensional levels of information. And one of the things he talked about was, I remember this because I mean, it's certainly not who talks about the Albigensian Crusades, right? You know, so the last time I thought about the Albigensian Crusades was this talk that this man gave. And he said that that the Crusades, of course, if you listen to the, you know, narrative of the Vatican at the time, they were going to say, oh, we're going to stamp out heretics and, you know, kill them. And what this represented, well, he said the word Albi was, it translates to fairy. And it's interesting because the Cathars, the etymology of the word Cathars, which were the sect, the Christian sect that were in that area, that translates from the Greek, which means the pure ones. So it was this effort to, you know, stamp out this I think pretty hip community. You know, they're feminists, they don't eat meat, and you know, they're just cool people. And not that I would necessarily agree with everything they, you know, there's other things that many of them took these certain things to an extreme. So, you know, we have to look at all this, you know, in a broader context. But the idea being like, what can we learn from this with Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius at the time? And so it's this desire to embrace more holistic and progressive concepts, you know. And so at that time, it didn't work out for the Cathars, right? They eventually, about 50 years later or so, they were all, it was just done, right? That sect was just pretty much, it was disbanded very, very sadly, right? In that case. But I would say that this represents this, the status quo versus moving forward. and differing points of view, so engaging ourselves in different points of view. The other thing is with the Saturn in 1226, Jupiter and Saturn it wasn't just it was, Orthodox Christianity versus unorthodox Christianity. You could say that, because Jupiter is about organized religion, right? It rules religion. So this push and pull, that then engaged at that time. The other thing too that was interesting about that time, on a lighter note, I remember my art history classes, and I loved art history when I was in college. I just was fascinated with the progress of time and how, humankind expressed themselves. And I remember my professor telling us about the Gothic cathedrals and how I love cathedrals. When I went to Europe, I remember going and making time to visit all the, as many of the great cathedrals that were in my path of travel. And I remember in the Gothic architecture, it reached its zenith really in that 1200, in the 1200s, right? So 1226, it would have been definitely during the high point, or what, high Gothic. They call it high Gothic architecture, right? So high Gothic, what does that represent? Well, it was at its zenith, right? So we have enormously incredible art. If you look at the various the cathedrals of that time, Notre Dame, the Cathedral at Reims in France, in the north of France, that was the coronation cathedral for all the coronations of the kings of France, going back, starting in the Middle Ages, were in that cathedral. Up until, later on, I think it shifted to Notre Dame. But anyway, that was, it's almost, and I did go there too, and I saw it for myself. I was very, very grateful for that opportunity. And to stand there and to see these high, it was something like 240 feet high, the vaulted ceilings. Well, at that time, they had invented what's called the flying buttress and rib vaults. And these were engineering breakthroughs that enabled them to build these really, really high 2 stories of stained glass windows. So the old Gothic architecture was lower and it was heavier, it was more Byzantine, and they didn't know how the engineering breakthrough wasn't there to build those. They wanted to build higher walls because they felt like, I wanted to reach God. That was the belief, is like to be closer to God, to feel that sense of expansiveness. Well, they couldn't do it with the early Gothic architecture. If you look this up and look at the pictures, you'll see they're very heavy and they didn't have the wherewithal. Well, when they engineers, which by the way, Saturn rules engineering and architecture, and when they developed these, the flying buttress, which is like a vaulted arch, right? It's like this. It's an outside support. It looks like a rib almost. And if you look at like the outside of any of these great cathedrals, you'll see these beautiful, delicate, strong, but very beautifully made outside arch supports. And that allowed the builders to build higher and to build a second story of stained glass windows. So that's why it enabled them to do these outrageous, huge stained glass windows, like in Chartres Cathedral, the rose window. It's just, out of this world. So, and literally out of this world that's the Aquarian, right, archetype. So just think, during that time period, and if you ever have a chance to go to these cathedrals and to see these, you feel so expansive. You automatically bring your head up and you gaze at that high ceiling, and to look at the light coming through, right? There's so much light is streaming through these windows. So it gives you this sense of wonder and awe and otherworldly presence, which takes you away from the mundane concerns of the earth plane. So that's very Aquarian. So that's what was happening in 1226, right? We had this breakthrough. It's all about newness and these engineering marvels that allowed us to move forward. So this is what we're going to be revisiting now. We have now, of course, in our day and age, we have AI. you know, technology, and a lot of it is artificial intelligence. And so, yes, there is the potential for enormous breakthrough, and being able to embrace the very best of these things, of course, is our wish. And the shadow being, you know, too much AI, right? So we don't, Jupiter is about expansion, and sometimes it just turns up the dial. So it can be like too much, you know, too much in terms of technology, and moving into, and where it can isolate us and restrict us and challenge us as well. So that's something that we want to work out, you know, in the collective and in our own lives. You know, how much technology do you engage with, and you know, for what purpose? Is it for making a better world, or is it just to isolate oneself? You know, these are like the questions that we want to ask ourselves. So having said that, I noticed that when you know, when Saturn went into zero Aquarius, now we're back in this century, you know, looking at this takeaway, you know, what engineering marvels, what can we engineer in ourselves? What kind of structures do we want to put into place in our lives, in our, what kind of boundaries do we want to set up? What kind of, where do we want to focus, and what do we want to achieve that's going to help the world? That's going to be more of a sharing consciousness. That would be more of a Saturn in Aquarius. And Jupiter is there, the beneficence, you know, to amplify that and to boost us in a more spiritual direction, you know. So I have to say, what was very wonderful news this week was that President-elect Biden nominated Deb Haaland, the New Mexico Congresswoman, to be the first Native American in Secretary of the Interior. Now, of course, any Native American in Congress, period, is a huge breakthrough. There's only a handful of them. I think they're all women, few of them women. Well, the fact that she is nominated to be the Secretary of the Interior, it's really an incredible circle completing, because if you do your history, you'll remember that the Department of the Interior was the federal department that was really orchestrated the Native genocides, the Native American genocides in the 1800s, the 19th century. And so to have a Native American there, of course, and she is known, and was, many members of Congress wrote a letter to President-elect Biden and said, look, you know, we really want you to nominate her, because she has done enormous work in bringing the tribes together with the government, and having them each work with each other, which is so you know, that's so Gemini Sag, right? You know, let's listen to another point of view. And of course, very Aquarian, you know, coming together and moving beyond the chaos and the trauma and the catastrophe of that genocide, and coming around to heal and to renew and to bring forth something better, and to be more connected, you know, connecting all peoples, all elements, you know. So yeah, very exciting news. So anyway, what might we expect with, you know, one other thing too in the news I saw was this Israeli general. He's 87, so he's in his third Saturn return. He's retired general. He came out, now this was technically about a week ago. And so forgive me if I don't think I've mentioned this before, but anyway, it was on NBC News, believe it or not, that he said that there actually are ETs, and that President Trump knows about them, but he's not allowed to talk about them. So I know Trump likes to do all the Twitter, right? But apparently I haven't seen anything in that regard. But he did say this, and it was on like a major news outlet, at least one of them. So I thought, well, that's not a surprise, because as we've said, you know, we're definitely going to be seeing more. Here we are, you know, that when it came out on about the 8th of December, it was a week before the eclipse, which was conjunct the galactic center. of the Milky Way. So I knew that, you know, ET information and revealings and would be coming forth, you know, naturally. So yeah, there's one of them. But I found it really quite fascinating that, you know, here's this very decorated general, and he had been in that space security agency role in Israel for like 30 years. So, you know, this was no low-ranking guy, right? He was at the very top of his career and profession to be speaking about these things. You know, that's really controversial. So definitely going to be seeing more of that, especially with the solstice, with Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius on the solstice. That's a really powerful, talk about a powerful portal. 0 degrees of any sign is what's called a critical degree, and it will give you the little preview of what's going to be unfolding over the next, in the case of Saturn, 2.5 years. So we can look forward to, you know, watch the news and watch what happens in your life, because the themes that you're seeing now are ones that are going to play out, you know, collectivity and community versus being isolated. Is there somebody who's lonely and cut off and marginalized? Can you reach across the table, and can you check in on your neighbor? Can we really get beyond our own selfishness and self-centeredness and come together for a greater purpose? That would be definitely you know, some good questions to ask ourselves. And, you know, how can we make that work? Let's see. So the 0 Aquarius, yeah, it's a preview of coming attractions. And, you know, Jupiter being there as well would be preview of coming attractions as it regards unknown truths, perhaps you could say, things that have ready to be revealed, justice being served, investigations undertaken, you know, journalistic breakthroughs. So these are places where, you know, things will be, you know, potentials for transformation. And it's, of course, this is our, you know, 20-year cycle in the air signs. It's the beginning of a new 20-year cycle, and this cycle happens to be in the sign of Aquarius. And then it's gonna, you know, in 20 years from now it'll be Libra, and then 20 years from then it'll be Gemini. So it'll be air. But the Aquarian air is truly the one that's don't see it coming, very can be mind-boggling, and we just have to be willing to be comfortable with the unknown. Yeah, I would say that's probably the best advice for that. Let's see, anything else I wanted to say about that? Checking my notes. Oh yeah, so, you know, I think about Uranus energy, and Uranus being the modern ruler of Aquarius, and I think about the Kundalini energy in the body. If you study yoga, you know, Kundalini yoga is a whole branch of yoga that deals with this, you know, the light body and the nervous system, right? So I would think that there's a major upgrade, right? That there's something at hand here where if we cultivate using breath work and pranayama, very, very great practices to do to prepare the body and to bring ourselves into a higher level of awareness and consciousness. This is going to be so, so important as we are moving away from the dense Capricorn-ish, you know, the dense third dimensional plane into a higher form of being. We're going to feel an enormous sense of freedom. What's available to us is, you know, freedom, independence, a feeling of letting go of the shackles, you know, that have held us back, thinking outside the box, being okay with the unusual different parts of ourselves, and diversity, and finding unity not into being a herd mentality. That's very shadow, right? This shadow Aquarius is this herd mentality. We want to be in a we mentality, but embracing everybody's differences. When you think about something like, you know, think of like Star Trek, or, you know, some sci-fi, whatever your favorite sci-fi, you know, movie or franchise is. Think about all those characters. Every one of them is different. You know, you've got like Captain Kirk, and then you've got Spock, and he's like, they're so different. And then there's the Doctor, and there's Uhura, you know, and all these, right, in Star Trek, right, all these characters, and they all work together, but they're each absolutely unique and completely developed. There are no clones. There are no clones on these spaceships in Star Trek, right? There's, unless the bad guys with clones, right? But interesting lesson, right? Codex. So develop yourself. Yeah, develop yourself uniquely and richly and fully. Really establish that as your uniqueness is what is going to create a beautiful tapestry of the world, you know, of the world we're moving into. It's depending upon our uniqueness. It depends upon us thinking for ourselves. So yeah, so there's that. Let's see. Oh, I also, in terms of the breath and all, and I think of Saturn, like the breath and the nervous system being very Uranian. And in terms of Saturn energy of integrity and creating the status quo, this interesting dichotomy, it almost seems like, but finding the status quo and being different. Think about that one. But in the integrity, that's something perhaps to consider, that integrity would be our new currency. Instead of the colonialist materialist world, what if integrity is what we traded on? Our integrity, our own personal integrity, and, you know, doing what's right. Like having an idea for currency rather than a thing like a gold coin or a dollar. You know, it's like, what are we going to really trade on? It's not going to be material. It's something else. So something to consider. Let's see. Okay. I would say the best advice for this in this particular, because I'm going to give you that idea I was sharing earlier with you. Who to be, you know, like a really powerful mindset for navigating this timing would be, maybe ask, how can I help my fellow man or woman, non-binary, you know, even better, right? The LGBT community, communities, you know, Black and Indigenous people of color, any marginalized community, brownie points, total brownie points. Really, like, that's it's the whole idea is not, I mean, it's great to help somebody, but what if you help somebody that had a completely different point of view than you? You know, spend time with them, talk to them. It's not about trying to convince each other of your right point of view, because there's just points of view. There are no right points of view. And so that's something to try on. And if that's confronting to you, then you definitely want to try that on. But how can I help? How can I reach across the table? Who do I need to reach across the table to? My parents that are driving me crazy, you know, my, you know, people who are maybe bosses and authority figures, maybe people who are older that are harder to, maybe anyone who has rigid beliefs or fixed beliefs, but to be compassionate about it. And you know, this is not about making people wrong. We're just asking, how can I volunteer? You know, who needs help? Maybe we can go to the food pantry. I'm thinking too of, you know, I'm really inspired to be, with COVID being still so intense right now, and we don't know when it's going to plateau, but hopefully soon. But we can say, you know, prayers and various ways of praying, right? It doesn't necessarily mean just sitting and praying, and, you know, not that nothing wrong with that. Mantra is great. Yoga. We could dedicate gardening or a walk to people, or we could take something on ourselves, like our own, maybe do a fast or a word fast or a juice fast. Maybe make a commitment. I'm still feeling that out. I want to do something. I'm very inspired to do something maybe one day a week, like a speech fast where I'm not going to talk, or I'm not going to go on technology. Oh my God, right? Put the phone down. And if that's confronting to you, that's probably something that you need to do. It's something that you really feel like you're giving something up, because the energy of that's that sacrifice, that pressing in and of limitation and all, it's like a balloon. You press in one side and it opens up on the other side. So think about that. How can this work? It can work. And by taking on some kind of a sacrifice, on some kind of restriction, it will allow an expansion of consciousness, you see. And that is, talk about invisible energy, right? That's where Aquarian is not concrete, right? It's this quantum field gets expanded, and that quantum field expanded and our consciousness expanded can only help humanity. It will help COVID. It will help end this intense journey that we're all on, this very, very serious situation that has affected the entire planet. So just some thoughts, words of wisdom, things to try on. But whatever, I'm just really inviting you to take on something that's just a stretch. It's a little stretch, and that stretch is gonna, it pings us, and that's good. So we're not in this lazy kind of, world on autopilot. Something that can really call us to be, have us step up. So I'm gonna figure it out, and I'm sure of the next day or two, I'll figure out what I'm going to exactly be doing in that regard, and I'll let you know. And if you have any ideas to share, just leave them in the comment box below. It's always great to hear that, and we can share ideas, or you can write to me, whichever, starsoundastrology.com. If you need a session to know where, please contact me. Where does Jupiter and Saturn come together in your chart? Where's that going to occur for you, and what area of your life is going to be impacted by this change? It's always going to be one certain area, and then how will that light up the rest of your chart? So I can help you with all that. So yeah, that's probably one other thing is just December 23rd, right before Christmas, Mars is going to make its final square with Pluto. And so that's intense. And so that's the challenge to, who am I going to be? Mars, my identity, my sovereignty, my light, my passion, and how can I meet that with responsibility, where I'm not being, conquering energy, where it's turning aggression into passion. And how can I do that in a way that's going to assist others? And how can where do I meet my challenges? Are there any unseen mechanisms that are running me in terms of survival, in terms of surviving my family, surviving my boss, surviving society, surviving the status quo, and to overcome and to heal these things that might be hidden from us. The mechanisms might be hidden, but that it will enable us to invent a whole new base of reality for ourselves, and where we can really come into our power, standing up for ourselves. So anyway, yeah, just wanted to mention that. So thank you all for listening. I am very grateful to be here, and grateful for all of you. If you have any ideas about what you'd like me to cover, that's always, always welcome. Irlianna at StarSoundAstrology.com. You can send an email through the website, or you could, down below, leave a comment. And it's just great to be able to assist you all. And it's a me and we thing, right? It's just, you all have helped me so much, and I'm very grateful for all the feedback that I receive from you. It's I always take it in my heart. And anyway, I just wanted to say in closing, just a little prayer. May we come from our heart and and see and feel all the potentials that are available to us as we move into this new era of understanding. Maybe find unity and diversity and peace and enormous freedom and enlightenment as these planets come together. And so it is. Don't forget to look for Jupiter and Saturn in the sky at sunset. It's gonna, that Christmas star they're talking about. Yeah, it's gonna look pretty special. I saw it last night. It was pretty cool. It was getting closer and closer, right? But Saturn is, of course, further away. So the brighter one of the two is Jupiter, and it's closer and bigger. But they'll merge as one big ball of light on the solstice. So, yay! Very excited. What a time, right? What a time to be alive. Anyway, thank you so much. Namaste. Peace. Namaste. The light in me salutes the light in you. So thank you. This is Irlianna Samsara, StarSound Speaks, StarSound Astrology. Thank you all for listening.